Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grandt. I had been calling myself the adoption coach, but if I'm being honest, I just love helping parents who are struggling to connect, parents who are struggling to understand how to handle their child's behaviors. I will always have it in my heart to help adoptive and foster parents because it's been part of my story along the way. But anyways, I just wanted to clarify that. I think I get a lot of questions about that, about do you only help adoptive parents? And no, I help any parent who's really just struggling to connect. But back to the podcast here. So in the last episode, I talked about regulation and gave some practical tips of ways that you could help your child to regulate, how to notice what regulation might look like. I also walked through what leads to dysregulation. This week, I wanted to take that next step and really talk about, what do we do next? Because this regulation piece, it's at the core of our kids. It's at the core of trying to meet their needs so that they can access the higher level functions of their brain, right? We notice that our kids are dysregulated when we notice the behaviors. We notice that they're being impulsive, they're not making good decisions, maybe they're being aggressive, or they can't follow directions that in your heart they understand what you're saying, but what we see is our kids who can't follow instructions. They can't regulate. They can't slow themselves down. That's what it looks like to us. So when in the last episode, when we were talking about some really key practical things that you can do to help regulate our kids, the reason that I wanted a full episode just talking about that first is because often what I see out in the community, in my interactions with parents in every aspect of my life, the questions that I hear often from parents are around actually the very last step of what we want to happen. So let me explain that a little bit. As parents, especially when we're raising kids who are, older than maybe 5 or 6, and sometimes even with younger kids, often as parents, when we have evidence that our kiddo has shown us that they know what we're saying, when they don't do what we in our mind have decided they are capable of doing, we quickly want to jump to reasoning with them. So, for example, if you ask your child to, I don't know, follow a direction and they don't do it, we might try some other strategies to support their success. Maybe break the instruction down a little bit more or provide some type of guidance so they can follow through. Maybe. Sometimes we go right to frustration, right? Sometimes our mind is telling us, well, they know how to do this. They're choosing to not do what I asked them to do. We look at it as deliberate defiance. And when our mind looks at the situation that way, we tend to want to reason with our kids, right? We'll either use consequences, like if you don't, do what I asked, then you're going to lose this privilege or that privilege. Or on the flip side, we might try to offer rewards. If you do this thing, then you get this reward. We try to reason with our kids. We try to help them follow through, or when our kids do things that go against what we hope. Maybe our kids are bullying another kid at school, or they were aggressive with their sibling, or they dumped pancake syrup all over the table. We quickly jump to want to try to reason with them about explaining to them why they can or can't do these things that, again, in our mind, we know they know how to do, and we perceive it like they've chosen to not do that. Well, I want to talk today about about all of this and share a really practical strategy that I was reminded of. I had learned this many, many years ago in my training to become a foster parent and in my training about trauma. And I was actually reminded about it. There's a movie that I just love watching that focuses on adoption and all of that. And I was reminded of it again as I was re-listening to a book that I just love. But so when we have kids who move in and out of this space of being regulated and dysregulated, or our kids who spend a lot of time in that space of dysregulation, it is so incredibly important that we don't jump to our conclusion that they made a deliberate decision to be defiant. It's also really important that we don't jump, even in the best intentions, but jump to trying to help reason with them, help them problem solve, help them figure out a better way to do it if we haven't taken those first steps. And that first step is regulation. So let's take an example of your kiddo is aggressive with their sibling. And so you see this aggression, the sibling is crying, you've dealt with this hundreds of times before. And so you hear the yelling and the screaming and whatever happens in your home, and you swoop in. Oftentimes our first go-to is to start reasoning with our kiddo, right? Like, you can't do that. That hurts them. We've talked about this before. You have better tools in your tool belt. You need to do blah blah blah, right? We tend to jump to reasoning, but we must first regulate our child, and for a couple of reasons. The two primary reasons that I see that we must first focus on regulation is that, one, it is likely if you have a kiddo who spends a lot of time in this dysregulated space, it's really likely that the behavior itself is actually a reflection of the dysregulation and not a child who made a deliberate decision to be defiant or aggressive or mean or whatever story that you have running through your head. Chances are that that behavior that's driving you crazy, that you are just so relentlessly trying to stop this behavior, there's a really good chance that underneath that behavior is a dysregulated child. And so I believe I shared it last week in the most recent episode about regulation, but when we think about a dysregulated child and then we see the behaviors, I really encourage you to look at it in the same way that we would look at a medical condition. If your child was struggling with maintaining their blood sugar, and as a result, you saw their symptoms of low blood sugar, well, you'd address the blood sugar first, right? You wouldn't try to reason with them about why they shouldn't have done what they did. Oh my gosh, that would be ridiculous, right? If your child um, has diabetes, for example, and maintaining their blood sugar is a challenge for them, and then they faint or they become cranky or whatever symptoms you see with your child, you wouldn't notice those behaviors and try to reason them into, behaving better or keeping their blood sugar in check, right? You would make sure they get the food that they need or the medication that they need to re-regulate their blood sugar. I'm telling you that it is the same with our nervous system regulation. We tend to look at it different because we see all these behaviors in front of us, but we must first regulate our kiddo because it is likely the underlying cause of the behaviors that are driving you nuts And so we have to address them first and foremost. And the other huge reason that we can't jump to reasoning is because when our child is dysregulated, your words are just going right over their head or in one ear and out the other, whatever analogy you want to use. But your kiddo isn't even processing what you're saying because they're dysregulated. So we must first regulate our child. And I shared some strategies last week about what that might look like. I know that for you, it might be a challenge to look at your child who is, bonking their sister on the head for the 10th time today with their baseball bat, and you're frustrated and you're angry, right? I know that it can go against the grain of everything that you've been taught about handling behaviors, but I really encourage you to give it a try and to look at your child's behaviors through the lens of dysregulation. If every time your child was misbehaving, every time you had that feeling in you that you are frustrated, you're ready to blow up, you're angry, whatever it might be, I really implore you to take a pause and to tell yourself, my child is dysregulated. They need my help to regulate. They need my help to regulate. And then do whatever works for your family. I would love to explore ideas with you if you need help brainstorming, or I encourage you to reach out to an occupational therapist who can help you with that as well. But first, regulation. And then the next step, so I'm sharing the 3 steps that have been um, kind of pulled together by Dr. Bruce Perry. I it When we think about trauma, these 3 steps are really key. So the first step is regulation. The second step is relate. So regulate, relate, and then the last one is reason. So what do I mean, or what does he mean by relate, right? So we've talked about regulation, we've talked about how important that is, and we can't skip that step. We cannot jump right to reasoning because it won't be effective and you're not addressing the underlying cause. So then that second step is relate. And I know for myself, when I was just so fed up with behaviors, when I was exhausted, and I myself was in this constant state of high arousal, right? Like I was waiting for the next behavior and the next behavior and the next behavior. I was exhausted and I was on high alert, and I myself was not regulated. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but but when I was in that high arousal state and then I was dealing with these behaviors constantly, I found it really hard to relate with my son. I found it really hard when I was in this triggered state myself. I found it really hard to get down on his level, to relate with him, to show him that I could see that he was having a hard time. I found that really hard. I'm here. I know that I went through what I went through so that I can help you to do it better. I've spent the last several years really filling my toolbox with tools to help you do it better. And I've had so many opportunities now to implement these things for myself and to coach other families through them. Is that once our child is regulated, don't jump to reasoning then either. Once your child is regulated, take time to relate with them, get down on their level, use eye contact whenever possible, unless your child has autism, and then be mindful about what works best for your child. But in general, when trauma is at the core of what we're dealing with, that eye contact and relating can be really key. So get down on your child's level, engage in eye contact, listen more than you talk. Take time to hear what your child has to say about what they're going through without you grilling them about why they behaved the way that they did. When I suggest relating, and when Dr. Bruce Perry suggests relating, it isn't about questioning your child's motives or trying to figure out why they did what they did, because we just talked about that, right? Your child did what they did because they were dysregulated. There's a really good chance that they weren't trying to hurt their sibling or make you mad or ruin your day or be defiant or whatever story is going on in your head. There's a really good chance that none of those are part of what's going on in your child. By relating with your child, it means you provide space for them to share what they feel comfortable sharing. You provide them an emotionally safe space for them to share feeling words or to talk about something that's bothering them without any judgment. When you relate with your kiddo, you don't place any judgment. You are neutral and compassionate and listening more than you're talking. Then and only then, after you've taken that time to make sure your child is regulated, to take the time to relate with them, then and only then is it really appropriate? Is it really productive to do reasoning with them, to help them problem solve a way to do it different next time? We can't put the cart before the horse. We can't jump to that reasoning first. But I can tell you that when we as parents are in that reactive state, we tend to want to reason with our kids first. We see a problem, we want to fix it. We see that they did something wrong, and our parenting brain says, I need to make sure they know right from wrong. Well, I'm confident that most of the time, if not all of the time, your child already knows right from wrong. They're already beating themselves up inside for what they did. They don't want to hurt other people. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to be bad. Something inside of them is dysregulated or feeling hurt or questioning whether or not they're lovable. So regulate first, then relate, and then last we reason. So I had said that I wanted to come back to a topic that I had mentioned a few minutes ago, and I don't want to lose sight of that. But if you find that as you're going through this process of parenting in general, parenting your child with exceptional needs, or you're in the moment and you want to do what I just talked about, you want to help your child regulate, you want to help them relate with you, you want to then get to the point of reasoning, right? That's what most parents want to do. They want to help their child make better decisions. Well, if you yourself are dysregulated, you also need to start at step one. Find ways to regulate yourself. So when we take what I talked about last week about science tells us, research tells us that there are a couple of really key things that can help you to help all humans to regulate. One being movement. Repetitive, rhythmic movement is regulating to the nervous system. So whether it's rocking or tapping or swaying or dancing, whatever works for you, but that can be one of the easiest and most powerful ways that you can help to regulate your nervous system in the moment, no matter what you're doing. If your child is escalating, start swaying back and forth. Or start humming a tune that has a rhythmic beat to it so that you can start regulating yourself. And interestingly, when you start regulating yourself, there's a really good chance that your child is going to mirror you, copy you, do what you're doing. And in you working on regulating your own energy, there's a really good chance that you're already going to start regulating your child before you even start working on trying to help them. Just by you regulating you, research tells us that that can have a really profound impact on our kids. So I hope that you found these really key steps about regulation and taking what we talked about in the last episode and really putting it into practice this week. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please reach out to me via email. If you're ready to start making change in your family and you're trying what we talk about here on the podcast and you just need that extra help to put it all together, well, I invite you to book a free session where I go through a really powerful exercise and help you figure out how to best support your family. I know that it is my purpose to help parents to do better, to do different, to meet their kids where they're at, and I'd love to help you too. So thank you so much for listening, and we will chat soon. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.